Hello, welcome back, Bishop J. Sheard, a name that once commanded deep reverence across the Church of God in Christ, has just made a decision that has shaken the foundation of the faith community he's served for decades. After years of committed leadership, unwavering faith, and sacrifice, Bishop Sheard is walking away not with the quiet grace of retirement, but with the quiet pain of betrayal. His exit is not a carefully planned farewell, but a raw emotional response to an internal fracture that has left him wounded in ways no one outside his circle could have anticipated. The story unfolding isn't just about one man stepping down. It's about the heartbreak that comes when those you trust turn their backs, and the strength it takes to keep your soul intact when the world you helped build no longer feels like home. Bishop Sheard's name has long been synonymous with integrity, power, and spiritual vision. Raised in a devout Pentecostal home, he inherited his father's passion for holiness and service. He didn't simply enter ministry, he embodied it. From his early days as a Detroit pastor to transforming Greater Emmanuel Institutional COGIC into a national epicenter of worship, his journey was marked by resilience, faith, and undeniable spiritual authority. His sermons moved hearts, his ministry reached generations, and his reputation as a leader grew far beyond the boundaries of any one congregation. In 2021, when internal tensions rattled the Church of God in Christ, Bishop Sheard was elected presiding bishop. For many, he symbolized a bridge between tradition and modern reform. He didn't shy away from controversy, but instead approached it with grace and wisdom. Under his leadership, outreach grew, media expanded, and faith deepened. His marriage to gospel legend Karen Clark Sheard only added to the legacy. They weren't just spiritual leaders, they were a power couple rooted in ministry and love. So when whispers began to rise that Bishop Sheard was pulling away, that he was canceling meetings, that he was withdrawing emotionally and spiritually, the shock was palpable. It didn't make sense. This was a man who had given his life to the church. What could have possibly caused him to turn away? The answer came slowly, in fragments, through murmurs and insider confirmations. It wasn't outside forces that broke him, it was those inside the fold. People he trusted, people he'd mentored, people who, in the quiet of backroom meetings, plotted around him, reshaped the very structure he'd worked to preserve, and questioned his leadership in the most demeaning ways. Behind the scenes, boardroom politics had intensified. Financial disagreements, theological rifts, and debates about the future direction of the church spiraled into something more sinister. A proposal emerged that would reduce the authority of the presiding bishop, a change Bishop Sheard resisted. He believed the decades of sweat and sacrifice shouldn't be undone by one vote. He stayed composed publicly, but those close to him noticed the shift. He grew distant, cautious. And then came the cruelest cut. One of his closest allies, a man he'd poured into for years, reportedly joined a faction aimed at pushing him out. Emails and messages surfaced in which board members mocked his emotional reactions and belittled his leadership during a time his family was facing a personal health crisis. When Bishop Sheard discovered these communications, he reportedly locked himself in his office for hours, refusing to speak even to his wife. It wasn't anger, it was devastation. The trust he'd built, the relationships he'd nurtured, all shattered in an instant. The aftermath was swift. He stopped attending major meetings, canceled preaching engagements. Slowly, he detached from the very machine he once fueled. Then came the call that changed everything, a private meeting with a select few trusted advisors where he announced his decision to step away. His words were chilling. "If I can't trust the ones closest to me, I can't lead them." And with that, the man who carried the denomination on his back walked away. What made the situation even more painful was the silence that followed. No public support, no acknowledgement, no call for reconciliation. The leadership remained mute, and that silence became deafening. It was Karen Clark Sheard who finally broke it. In an unfiltered, emotional Instagram Live, she spoke not as a gospel star or first lady, but as a wife watching her husband crumble. She wore no makeup, no show, just pain. She described how the betrayal had altered their home, how Bishop Sheard stopped praying out loud, how his spirit had been wounded not by God but by men he thought stood beside him. She spoke of a church that took everything from him and then offered nothing in return when he needed support. Her words, this wasn't just disrespect. It was spiritual sabotage, struck a chord across the nation. The video spread like wildfire. Churchgoers, gospel singers, pastors, and ordinary believers shared her message. The support was overwhelming, but the leadership's silence persisted. Church members began speaking out, creating online campaigns, organizing prayer vigils, and calling out the lack of accountability from COGIC's board. The community, long silenced by tradition, began rising up with one voice. Hashtags were born, sermons were preached, petitions gathered thousands of signatures. Videos surfaced of people across generations demanding transparency. A teenage girl in Georgia captured the pain of many when she tearfully testified that Bishop Sheard was the reason she came back to church, only to see him driven out. What once was quiet heartbreak turned into spiritual uprising. Even bishops and superintendents began to release anonymous statements supporting Bishop Sheard. They didn't name names, but the message was clear. He didn't walk away because he failed. He left because he was failed. And then came the leak. A private voice memo, meant for a handful of trusted pastors, found its way online. In it, Bishop Sheard's voice was subdued, his words weary but filled with love. He spoke of the pain, of being let down by silence more than schemes. He confessed how he gave everything, missed family moments, ignored his own healing, all for a calling he believed in, and when he needed his brothers to stand, they vanished. Yet, even in his grief, he ended the message with grace. If my stepping away brings peace to this church, then I'll carry that cross. But never forget this. I served with love, and I leave with love. That final line became a rallying cry. It flooded social media, appeared on tribute videos, and echoed across churches nationwide. Still, the leadership remained silent. Not a single word from the top. To many, it was confirmation. The betrayal was real, and the silence was not oversight, it was protection. But something powerful began happening in the void. The people filled it, and the louder they got, the clearer the message became. This was no longer just about Bishop Sheard. This was about the soul of the denomination. With Sheard gone, the cracks in COGIC's leadership were beginning to show. Local churches called for truth. Youth ministries demanded reform. Leaders started to question the system instead of defending it. And Bishop Sheard? He's not done. Sources say he's healing, spending time with his wife, contemplating new ways to minister outside the system that hurt him.